Hello folks, how's it going? So welcome to another One Piece review. This time we're covering manga chapter 1118. I'm not gonna lie, when I read the title of this chapter, I initially assumed it had something to do with the Straw Hats and the warriors from Elbaf along with Bonney escaping, but I'm like, no, they still got some hoops to jump through before they're able to escape, namely the Gorosei. So I'm like, no, even though it's we're literally at the tail end of the arc, it's still a little early for the escape. So no, so I had to be referring to something else. Little did I know, would have the very thing he foreshadowed last year through Saturn have it play out in this chapter. I did not expect that ending, but I love this chapter and I love that moment because the amount of build up that it got and the amount of build up that Bonney has got throughout this entire arc has been amazing. But I'll get to that by the end because that's obviously a huge topic of discussion right now. I do find it interesting because you have Yamato on the cover page and how Yamato blossomed into arguably one of the best characters that came out of Wano. How Yamato was handled, but the payoff, we don't know. Like I said, I'll hold off judgment until whatever happens, because the cover page literally has Yamato leaving the Flower Capital. We don't get a whole lot of interaction, but we do get some progression because she's departing from the Flower Capital to make a journey to Hakamai. You get the citizens from the Flower Capital bidding her farewell. It looks like there's music being played because you see the music note, which I think is kind of appropriate considering what happened by the end of this chapter. And the thing is, these are not cover pages. This is a legit cover page series by Oda. So whatever happens here is not done by coincidence. So just want to point that out. But this leads me to the same question I asked a couple of times involving this cover story involving Yamato. What is the end goal here? Because if you remember, Yamato's excuse to Momonosuke and Kinemon for not leaving with the Straw Hats was, oh, well, I'll eventually leave, but Odin set off, explored Wano. By the way, Yamato was not banished or blackballed, unlike Odin, from the Flower Capital, going out to see the rest of Wano like Odin did. But that we know that's just a cover-up, because obviously it's to protect Wano from external threats, like we have with Green Ball. This, by default, is getting Yamato to explore Wano. So I have to wonder if this is done intentionally by Oda and Kinemon as to get rid of that plot point. So I don't know if Yamato does set sail off Wano eventually, because it has to lead up to something, especially at this stage of the game. So yeah, I'd keep that in mind, but just how Yamato was being handled in Wano was tremendous. It's the same thing here for Bonney. But let's get into this, and immediately it starts with the Iron Giant falling, and one of its arms lands on one of the marine ships. It looks like it hits a bunch of others as well. As it sinks into the ocean, by the way, it's important to note that then that Mushi, the audio transponder snail, is still trying to play. You see it saying, and their name was, referring to the D, and that's where it cuts off. Because obviously, nope, can't have anything else revealed. That's literally where the transmission cuts off from an audio standpoint. So everybody that's viewing this around the world, whatever Vegapunk was going to reveal about the D, not yet. But you do. Speaking of audio, it seems you see the giant talking about Joy Boy, because it says, Joy Boy, where did you go? I wanted our paths to cross. You were right here, right, Joy Boy? Because if you remember, when the Iron Giant was moving, it was heading to help out Luffy in the form of Joy Boy. But now he's out of Gear 5th, so we can't hear him anymore, which plays into the ending of this chapter perfectly. As the Iron Giant falls into the ocean, we see Sate Top Man towering over the marine ships, and they're like freaking out. Like, what the hell is this? A giant ball mammoth? I'm surprised it didn't use Conqueror's Hockey to knock them out. As the transmission cuts off, we see other parts of the world. We go back to Alabasta, and this is where Oda decides to like throw in conflict as far as like, questioning, was it the world government that attacked Vegapunk, or was it the pirates? Because obviously that BS story made up by Morgan's News that oh, Luffy kidnapped Vegapunk and is holding him hostage. So now there's some distrust. So I like that, but also it's not going to change the. Don't get it twisted. Like there's still going to be a huge amount of allies backing Luffy up. We go to York and the Gorosei are asking how many of you Vegapunks have survived, and she says the only two who are out there other than me are Atlas and Lilf. We know Lilf is with Nami's group. We know Atlas is with Sanji, Bonney, Frankie, and now by default Luffy. But they can't allow them to grow even if Stella actually dies. So that's like, no, we need to eliminate them. There's a benefit to keeping York safe, so I find that very interesting. So they're in danger now because they're the next target for the Gorosei. We know Nasjuro was near the Sunny the last time we saw him. The ship from Elbaf is ready to set sail, so let's get out of it, especially since Dory Bragi and Luffy have reunited. They jump on the ship, literally, and reunite with Bonney, Frankie, Atlas, and Sanji, so that's pretty cool. So we know that the crew's separated into two, but given what happens in this chapter, and by the way, I like the fact it's not just the ending of this chapter that I appreciate. There's a lot of other scenes in this chapter, which I did question and bring to the forefront previously, that does get addressed here. As Bonney reunited with Luffy, we actually see that Bonney's actually switched Vice Admirals Bluegrass and Doll, switched them into children with a devil fruit off screen because we see them as children, so that was pretty badass. Last chapter, they came off as badass, especially Doll punching the shit out of Kashi, one of the giants, sending him overboard. That was not a joke, but here she gets rendered into a complete joke by Bonney off screen, who's like, "Oh, you're gonna get into hot water for this because you're not supposed to let me get away." As Oda demonstrates in this chapter how broken it is, but you forget that Bonney can do stuff like this, making Vice Admirals powerless, so that's ridiculous. So also it's important to note that Bonney's holding a pistol as well, something you might want to keep in mind because I'm going to bring that to the forefront by the end. But believe me, there's a lot to dissect after this chapter, which is only a good thing. Seems like Sanji's in contact with Nami, and Nami's like, "Oh, thanks to Edison we'll be able to land in the ocean, but we're going to need some help to land safely because obviously there's marine ships." But so keep that in mind, and the fact that she's asking Sanji this is going to play a factor, definitely. I also said it's a possibility that Sanji could use Skywalk, because immediately Mars comes in trying to attack the ship from Elbaf, but mainly because Atlas is also on that ship. Keep that in mind. Meanwhile, in the depths of the ship, we have Luffy having a feast, trying to regain his stamina. But as Luffy is eating, it's important to note the chef of the ship is like addressing Luffy. It's like, "Oh, I wasn't planning on serving all this food at one go." But Luffy's like, "No, don't worry. Just gotta fill up now. Just cook some for later." Which I feel like that's also something to keep in mind here. Meanwhile, outside, Mars is opening fire, literally firing, trying to attack the ship. But the giants, Born and Sig, are literally shielding the attack with shields. But they get blown back, and the ship looks like it gets caught on fire, which is a problem because they're like, "Do not let the sails catch flames," which I feel like, I said this in the last review, if the ship gets damaged at all and is unable to make the trip to Elbaf, that's a problem. And by default, you've got the Sunny anyway. So meanwhile, the two giants get sent down, and Sanji's like, "Thanks for covering us." But then Dory and Bragi there's no ignoring these monsters. And then Bragi kind of brings up something that I've already mentioned. If they can fly, they can chase us to the ends of the world. Which I feel like that comment is something else to keep in mind. Because I feel like that's exactly what's going to happen if the Gorosei aren't dealt with. Because they're just going to end up chasing them regardless of wherever they go, whether it's Elbaf or not. So everybody that's not named the Straw Hats and Bonney is a question mark. Like, I would dare say Kuma, but we don't really know. But I still get this feeling that Kuma's going to do something. If not them, the Seraphim are definitely going to show up and do something. I honestly think Frankie has to come up with something. Because honestly, this is out of the entire Straw Hats when it comes to Vegapunk. He's the one that literally needs to shine. Meanwhile, as this is going on, as Mars is attacking, you literally have the Drums of Liberation playing because Luffy's full, and you also have an earthquake being felt. So what's hilarious is you think of the Marines, like the sea levels are rising, but no, it's just Luffy morphing into Gear 5th. Then you have Luffy literally popping up in front of Bonney, which is pretty hilarious, as Bonnie's like saying Nika, and Luffy, typical Luffy's like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, as this is going on, you got Doria Bragi dancing to it because they've got a festive beat going on with the drums of liberation. Luffy is coaching Bonney. It's like, come on, let's go and team up. Don't you want to blow these guys out of the water for what they've done? Bonney responds like, I couldn't keep up with you in that form. But Bonnie's like, and Luffy's like, sure you can. I don't know, I don't quite get your abilities, but I'm sure you got this. So this is kind of the coaching that Luffy has and the influence he has on other people. Because immediately following this, Bonney has a flashback to when Luffy is, I believe this is actually the first scene of when Bonney questions Luffy what was up with Luffy's bounty poster, because his appearance was different. As we got Luffy posed, and I believe that was right at the beginning of this arc. And Luffy's like, oh, that's just how I look when I'm totally free. And immediately following this, it triggers something within Bonney, because immediately she goes into the distorted future. You get the emergence because she literally appears with the form of Gear 5th, or the form of Nika, being questioned. What the hell's going on here? They became two albino giants. By the way, I love this moment. Bonney looks awesome in this form, and it looks like all of her natural clothes have gone white except for Egghead Island outfit, which I think is kind of interesting. Obviously, it gives you the vibe of what happened when Luffy awoke in Gear 5th for the first time, especially with not only an ally of Joy Boy spectating this, or in this case, being in this scene, because we saw it with Zunisha, and when Luffy first awakened Gear 5th, we saw Zunisha hyping it up with the Drums of Liberation, and also with that creepy smile of Zunisha. That sent that moment over the edge, even before Luffy transformed into Gear 5th. So same thing here, not only with the Iron Giant being in the scene, not only with the Gorosei being in the scene, not only with bystanders of the Marines and the warriors from Elbaf, and then what sends this moment over the edge for me is Kuma looking up in the sky, whether or not it's incoherent or not. He's looking up in the sky as he sees the two Manga Nika duo team up of Bonney and Luffy in the air, transformed into the size of giants in the appearance of Gear 5th. That was great. Also, you have to go say, like, sensing something that's wrong here, definitely wrong. The Iron Giant and Luffy's like, yo, let's do this. Bonney's like, yeah. And the Iron Giant says, Joy, there you are, Joy Boy. So Luffy awakened to Gear 5th again. Obviously, the build up, yeah, we saw Luffy go to Gear 5th, but this moment was building up Bonney and the payoff for Bonney, and that's how the chapter ends, with Bonney and Luffy, the Sun God Nika duo, about to team up and may cause some major damage. We don't know, I'll get to that in a second, but that's how the chapter ends. I did not expect this at this stage. I expected this team up to fight together. That's still, don't get it twisted, that's still going to happen. First thing to know is Bonney's abilities now are more of a mystery than ever before, because she literally copies what Luffy did. Now we see her in a form of Gear 5th herself, or at least in the form of Sun God Nika, where everything turns white except for, like I said, the Egghead outfit. Her natural clothes are turned white, kind of like Luffy. Also, what else sends this moment over the edge as well is Luffy literally has the same pose that he had when confronting Kaido when he first awakened Gear 5th. Now, this is not something that's completely out of left field, because this was foreshadowed multiple times, and this Bonney was hyped up at least 2 different times about this potentially happening. Saturn highlighted this last year. Oda had Saturn highlight this a year ago. This was a possibility when Saturn said, oh, she hasn't been influenced by the abilities of Nika yet. But he didn't say that outright. He literally said that he was in a monologue in. And I thought that, that's interesting. Why would Oda have Saturn say that, not outright, when he literally has Bonney in his clutches? So that was teased back then, and I initially said, okay, this opens up the door for a Luffy Bonney team up. Don't get it twisted. This doesn't end the alliance just because it happened now. I think, on the contrary, especially after this chapter, the fact that Oda had this moment implemented now This relates back to my question about the Gorosei, what happens with them? Because now this is a different ballgame. Because not only is Luffy a threat to the Gorosei, now we don't really know what Bonney could do. And the fact that the Gorosei sense, but it looks like they sense something is off. Like, we must hurry. Like, you see a sense of urgency in the Gorosei. So it's not just Luffy that has the power now. But for Oda to literally pull the trigger for Bonney here and adopt the form of Nika, same as Luffy now, that speaks volumes, and it means that this is going to lead to something bigger. I guarantee you, because there's a couple of factors to take in consideration here. We know Distorted Future is temporary. Like, Bonney cannot maintain this for long. So, is this a tease? But Bonney's going to run out of energy very quickly. And she's going to revert to base very quickly. I don't see this lasting longer than a chapter. Then they are definitely teaming up against the world government going post this arc. That is not in question anyway, because they're in escape mode anyhow. The thing is, like, Luffy asked Bonney, he's like, don't you want to get these guys back? Don't you want to send these guys into the ocean? The problem is, Saturn is the only Gorosei revealed to have been a thorn in Bonney and Kuma's life. Like, the other Gorosei, they are guilty by association, but they really haven't had a role in fucking up Bonney's life, and Kuma's life especially. And that's another thing, too, that I love about this scene, this moment has been built up tremendously. Just like Bonney has been built up tremendously throughout this entire arc. This was a possibility. The team up between Luffy and Bonney was always there. From the moment that Luffy and Bonney first interacted, especially when Bonney talking about her father the way she did, and the way that Luffy responded by apologizing, I'm like, okay, there's something different here that we did not see with Law and Luffy. From that moment on, we've had some tremendous interaction, and obviously it's built up a connection between the two, leading to here. So not only has the payoff been tremendous for Bonney here, but the payoff for this duo has been tremendous. You really have to pay close attention, like certain scenes that would obviously be overlooked. Oda didn't do this just to have it thrown away now. And again, Saturn is the object of Bonney's vendetta. Before, it was Vegapunk when she didn't know anything. Now it's Saturn because she knows the memories of Kuma. Kuma's look up in the air, which adds more to the emotion anyway, like I mentioned. So, you got a lot of question marks here, because what happens with the Gorosei now? Do they get defeated? Because Oda hyped up this war, or this moment, when the Battle of Egghead Island concludes, this will shake the very foundation of the One Piece world. You remember that speech? I do. Could we see the downfall of the Gorosei? Possibly. Or could it be a temporary boost for Bonney, and we get a much refined Bonney channeling this mode again later down the road? There's certain scenes you have also had in this chapter. For instance, when Brogy's mentioning the Gorosei and the fact that, since they can fly, no matter where we go, they'll just chase us regardless if we go to Elbaf or not. So, also on the side note, I mentioned this earlier, before Bonney transformed, we saw Bonney with a gun, a pistol. Bonney has a weapon, which, by the way, if she's able to copy the abilities of Luffy in Gear 5th, then who's to say she can't copy the abilities that Luffy has by affecting the objects? We saw Luffy do this with a tree, and he turned it into a baseball bat, blowing back, smashing some poison needles hurled at him by Saturn, only to have it hit back right in Saturn top man, exploding. Could Bonney do something similar with that gun? The conclusion of this arc is really up in the air. Like, before it was like a full-blown escape, now it's turned into like the ultimate Nika duo teaming up. Like I said, it could be a tease. We know Distorted Fusion's it's a temporary boost. Luffy did say, like, to have more food on standby. We know Bonney loves to eat as well, so I wonder if this is going to play a role as well to refuel Bonney. I'm curious to see what Bonney could do in this form. Like I said, the build-up for Bonney's character throughout this entire arc has been amazing. Much like Yamato was like the MVP, in my opinion, in Wano, Bonney's been the MVP of this entire arc. The fact she took 2 Vice Admirals out of the picture that got hyped up in the previous chapter, and then leads into this. After all this build up, after all this pain, after all this trauma she's had to go through, along with Kuma. Yeah, it's Kuma's backstory is a tragedy, but the thing is, this has been building Bonney up since the beginning. Like this was always going to pay off in some form or fashion. Who would have ever guessed it would lead to this? When this was teased by Saturn a year ago, a lot of people came up with fan theories that, oh, maybe other members of the Straw Hats could be influenced by Luffy's abilities, much like Bonney was in this chapter. And now here you have Bonney herself influenced by Luffy, taking on the form of Nika herself in the form of Gear 5th. I can't wait to see this in the anime. The build-up for this is going to be freaking insane. So it's time to get hyped. I'm curious, will Bonney and Luffy bring down Saturn, or will all the other Gorosei join them and be defeated? Oda has now flipped the script, because now it's in escape mode. Does this become a battle to take down the Gorosei for good? Is this why Oda had the 5 members of the Gorosei? Because first it was Saturn, who was the object of Bonney and Kuma's vendetta. Nash Juro, a couple of chapters ago, mentioned that Bonney's abilities, her powers, has the ability to destroy an entire country. The arc has been about Tremendous, but it's also been about clones. This moment is the ultimate form of cloning, if I've ever seen it, because now this is a whole different ballgame, like I mentioned, which does get me to think about what I said in the last review when it comes to Nash Juro and Zoro clashing, and the fact that Zoro recognized the sword that Nash Juro had in a Katetsu blade. But I said, we don't hold your horses, because we don't know if that's the real Shodai Katetsu. It's going to be very telling in the anime if Zoro sensed it was a Katetsu, or if he noticed it was a Katetsu, because he blocked Nash Juro's attack with not only Emna, but also the Sandai Katetsu. So it's literally the same design. So in the anime, because we'll find out if Zoro sensed that, or if he noticed that through the clash. So hold your horses. We don't know if that is the real Shodai Katetsu, if it's just a clone, if it's just another sword cloned off the original. We don't know. So like I said, I can't wait to see what Bonney and Luffy do now. This changes the game. Literally, I still think the Iron Giant could play a role, considering it's still alive. I don't expect any more of the transmission to be playing, but the Giant could still play a role. And I guess the moral of the story is Kaido was absolutely right when he said about Luffy. When he first revealed Gear 5th, Kaido literally says he has the ability to change the surroundings and those around him. Boy, was he right on that. Bonney's life has changed forever now, because now this is a whole different ball game. If I can borrow a quote from the anime, this is Bonney's peak here. The curveball I didn't expect to happen on Egghead Island. I expected it to go down eventually, because it was teased, but because there was an escape mode, Oda pulled the ultimate Uno reverse card, and now here we are. So I can't wait to see where this goes. Before I say sayonara, I do have an unboxing to do, because I've been putting this off for a few weeks now. So a couple of weeks ago, I went to a convention and I purchased a One Piece mystery box. So I haven't opened this since. I have no idea what's in here, but we're about to find out, and it's not heavy, I can tell you that. So with the power of editing, let's find out. I've got a couple of things here. It's like a poster. Oh, how appropriate. You see that? That's Kaido. That's Luffy, Dolphy. Speaking of Zoro, nice. We got a Trafalgar D Water Law. That's one hell of a keyring. Stamps here. Pre-time skip Nickel Robin. Perfect. Oh boy. We got Sabo from Phil Stampede. So let's go. And oh my gosh. Best for last. Yo! We got a Yonko watching here. What did you think of the chapter? I thought so. An incredible moment for Bonney. What's been a tremendous build up, so I can't wait to see what goes and how this arc officially wraps up. So that's gonna do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Like the review if you did it. Hit that thumbs up if you appreciate all the content on this channel. I appreciate that greatly. Subscribe to the channel for more One Piece, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.